Today, we're diving into the upcoming IPO for a company called Sudeep Pharma. Now, this is a really interesting one. They're a kind of invisible giant, making stuff that's absolutely essential to products you probably use every single day, but I'm guessing you've never actually heard of them. So we're going to break down their business, take a look at their financials, and figure out what this whole stock market debut is really all about.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll figure out what Sudeep Pharma actually does. Then, we'll get into the IPO itself, follow the money to see where it's going, and check out their financial report card. After that, I've got one really important number I want you to watch, and then we'll wrap it all up with the final takeaway. Sound good? Let's jump in.
So, first things first, who is Sudeep Pharma? Well, like I said, they're what you'd call an invisible giant. They are a supercritical player working behind the scenes in industries that, impact all of our lives.
I mean, think about it for a second. When you take a tablet or a vitamin, the actual active ingredient, the medicine, it's usually just a tiny, tiny fraction of that whole pill. So, what is all the other stuff? Well, that's exactly where Sudeep Pharma operates.
The answer is this word, excipient. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Think of it like you're baking cookies. The medicine is like the chocolate chips, right? But you can't just have a pile of chocolate chips. You need the flour, the sugar, the butter, all the stuff that holds it together and turns it into a cookie. Sudeep Pharma basically makes that flour and sugar for the entire pharmaceutical and nutrition world. And make no mistake, this is a huge operation. They've been around since 1989, and they've grown to the point where they're supplying over 1,000 customers all over the world. We're talking big names here: Pfizer, Merck, Danone, and their secret sauce? They focus on these really high-value specialty ingredients that are just incredibly difficult for anyone else to make.
So, you've got this massive, successful behind-the-scenes company. What's the next logical step? Well, it's the main event, the IPO. After decades of being a private company, Sudeep Pharma is finally stepping out into the public spotlight.
So, here's the headline. The company has officially filed the papers to get listed on the stock exchange. And what that means is that pretty soon, people like you and me will actually be able to buy shares and own a small piece of this company.
But with any IPO, you have to ask the most important question of all. Where is all this money actually going, right? Who's benefiting from this, and what is all that cash going to be used for?
Okay, so every IPO is basically split into two parts, two big buckets of money. The first bucket is called the fresh issue. That's brand new money going straight into the company's bank account to help it grow. The other bucket is the offer for sale, or OFS. That's where the original owners sell some of their own shares, and that money goes directly into their pockets. You could call it their payday.
Now, in this IPO, the company itself is raising 95 crore rupees from that fresh issue. This is the capital that's going to be pumped right back into the business.
But then look at this. A much, much bigger piece of the pie, 800 crore rupees, is from that offer for sale. So what this tells us is that the vast majority of the money being raised here is actually going to the founders, the promoters, as they cash out part of their ownership. This is for their personal liquidity, not for the company's growth.
So what about that 95 crores the company is getting? Well, it's mostly going towards what's called capital expenditure. To be specific, they're buying new machines to expand their ability to produce those really high-margin specialty ingredients we talked about. It's all about scaling up their most profitable business line.
All right, so now we know where the money's headed. Let's take a look at the company's financial report card. Have they actually been performing well enough to justify this big move to the stock market?
Well, the numbers here tell a pretty powerful story. In just a couple of years, their revenue grew nicely, from about 429 crores to 502 crores. But just look at the net profit. That's the real eye-opener. It more than doubled, jumping from just over 60 crores to an incredible 137 crores.
This chart really puts it all into perspective. Revenue growth was a very healthy 17%, but the profit growth? An absolutely explosive 127%. So what does that tell us? It means the company isn't just selling more stuff, it's getting way more efficient and selling more of its most profitable products. Profitability is just scaling way faster than their sales are.
So far, it's an amazing story, right? Great growth, awesome profitability, but there is one number buried in their financial reports that kind of makes you pause. It's definitely something you need to keep an eye on.
So what is this number? 282 days. On its own, it means absolutely nothing, but in the context of Sudeep Pharma's business, it is a hugely important indicator.
See, this number represents their net working capital days. Now, that sounds technical, but just put it this way. It's basically how long a company's money is tied up making and selling a product before the customer actually pays them. So the higher this number is, the longer they have to wait to get their cash back.
And here's why it's a concern. You can see on this timeline, just 2 years ago, that number was a much healthier 143 days. Today, it has ballooned all the way up to 282. That's a huge jump, and it suggests that even though their sales are growing, the company is having to wait much, much longer to get paid, and that can put a serious strain on their cash flow.
Okay, so let's pull all these different threads together and figure out our final takeaway on this Sudeep Pharma IPO.
So really it boils down to this. The good part is clear. You've got a global leader in a specialty market with fantastic profit growth, and they're investing in their best products. The watch out, the big red flag, is that rising working capital number. It's a real worry for their cash flow. And then layered on top of all that, you've got the structure of the IPO itself, where most of the money is just cashing out the founders, not actually funding the company's future.
And that really leaves us with this central question here, doesn't it? Is Sudeep Pharma a fantastic growth story in a high-margin business that's worth betting on, or is that worsening cash cycle a warning sign of a potential cash crunch just waiting to happen? That's the key puzzle you have to solve with this IPO.